So if you've been paying attention, you'll know that our last two episodes were about European colonialism in Africa. So it only makes sense that we now turn our attention to Asia and take a look at how the French went from being one of the first Europeans to set foot in India to ruling much of mainland Southeast Asia. France's involvement in Indochina, which encompasses present-day Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, was a defining chapter of its colonial history. From the mid-19th century until the mid-20th century, French Indochina would become one of the largest and richest colonies in the world. But how did this come to be? Well, there were three main factors at play here. First, there was the desire to compete with other European powers for resources and influence in Asia. Second, there was a proclaimed civilizing mission to spread French language, culture, and religion. And third, there was simply the opportunity to do so since the region was not yet under the control of any major power. The establishment of French rule in Indochina was a gradual process that spanned several decades. It began in 1858 when France launched a series of military campaigns against the Vietnamese in the south. By 1862, they had captured Saigon, and by 1873, they had extended their control over the rest of modern-day Vietnam. In addition to Vietnam, France also established protectorates over Cambodia and Laos. Cambodia fell under French control in 1863 after the Cambodian king sought protection from its powerful neighbors, Siam, present-day Thailand, and Vietnam. Laos was incorporated into French Indochina as a result of the Franco-Siamese War of 1893. With these victories, France had successfully colonized the region, and it was officially designated as French Indochina. But how did daily life change once it came under French colonial rule? Well, the answer is not good, especially if you weren't French. Despite the French notion of a civilizing mission, their primary goal in Indochina was economic gain. They focused on extracting resources and cheap labor from the region and funneling it back to France. To that end, they established a monopoly on the trade of key commodities like opium, salt, and rice alcohol. They also built large plantations for cash crops such as rubber, pepper, and coffee. French Indochina was particularly prized for its natural resources, including rubber, coal, and tin. The French exploited these resources to fuel their industrial and economic growth back home, further enriching themselves at the expense of the colonized people. Unfortunately, the benefits of colonization didn't extend to the indigenous population, who were subjected to forced labor, high taxes, and discriminatory laws. The French viewed the locals as inferior and sought to maintain social and racial hierarchy. They reserved the best jobs and opportunities for themselves and a select group of collaborators. While the French did invest in some infrastructure projects such as roads, railways, and cities, these were primarily designed to facilitate the movement of troops and the export of resources rather than to improve the lives of the colonized people. Despite the hardships they faced, the people of Indochina resisted French rule in various ways. Over time, a strong sense of nationalism grew, inspired by both local traditions of resistance and modern political ideologies like communism. One of the most prominent nationalist movements was the Viet Minh, or League for the Independence of Vietnam, which was founded in 1941 and led by Ho Chi Minh. The Viet Minh played a significant role in the struggle for independence from the Dutch. However, it wasn't until after World War II that the tide began to turn against the French. During the war, Japan had occupied and controlled much of Southeast Asia, including Indochina. When Japan surrendered in 1945, there was a power vacuum, and the French attempted to reassert their authority. But the Vietnamese people, who had suffered greatly under both the Japanese and French rule, were no longer willing to accept colonialism. On September 2, 1945, Ho Chi Minh declared Vietnam's independence, and the First Indochina War began. In this conflict, which lasted from 1946 to 1954, the Viet Minh, aided by China, fought against the French Union's forces. Despite receiving financial support from the United States, France struggled to contain the insurgency. The war reached its climax at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954, where the French garrison was surrounded and forced to surrender. This humiliating defeat broke the political will of the French government to continue the war, and the First Indochina War ended with the Geneva Accords of 1954. The accords provided for the independence of Cambodia and Laos and the temporary division of Vietnam along the 17th parallel pending national elections. Unfortunately, the United States, which had been providing financial and military aid to the non-communist South Vietnam, refused to recognize the Geneva Accords and supported the creation of a separate state in the South. This refusal to withdraw from Vietnam led directly to the Second Indochina War, more commonly known as the Vietnam War. And for a detailed look at that conflict, stay tuned for episode 11. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more historical tales. Thank you to Brilliant for supporting this episode, and thank you all for supporting this channel. I'll see you next time.